24 deleted Mario contents, 7 levels. From the most violent Mario sports game you never saw, to a scene considered too disturbing for the ultra-dark Mario movie. These are some of the most shocking deleted pieces of Mario media ever created. The deeper we get, the crazier and more disturbing they get. Let's go to the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Mario kills Tanuki. In 2011, something strange happened when Super Mario 3D Land hit store shelves. PETA launched a campaign they called Mario Kills Tanuki, targeting Nintendo's beloved plumber for wearing what seemed to be innocent, if strange, video game attire. This notorious animal rights organization saw something much darker lurking beneath this weird raccoon-like costume. It's just that nobody else saw it. PETA's argument cut straight to the bone. Tanuki are real animals, raccoon dogs native to Japan, and they're harvested for their fur. The group claimed Mario was essentially endorsing the fur trade by sporting his magical suit, sending children the message that wearing animal pelts was perfectly acceptable. Now, given that this is a pretty unrealistic video game, that's already quite a stretch. But PETA has never been one to be content with just words alone. Instead, the organization created its own twisted version of Mario's world. Super Tanuki Skin 2D dropped players into a nightmare scenario where they controlled a flayed, bleeding Tanuki desperately chasing down Mario to reclaim its stolen skin. The game featured a sinister version of the plumber, his suit dripping with blood, clutching the severed head of a raccoon dog. And just to make sure the message hits home, PETA's website showed disturbing footage of actual Tanuki being bludgeoned and skinned in fur farms. The gaming community did not take to it kindly. Fans couldn't believe PETA was aggressively targeting a character who magically acquired his suit from floating blocks in the air. Nintendo fired back, explaining that Mario had transformed into frogs, penguins, and even metal versions of himself without controversy. These were lighthearted and whimsical transformations that made no statement beyond entertainment. Why should this be any different? Within 36 hours, over 250,000 people had played PETA's macabre game, and the backlash was so brutal that PETA quickly backpedaled, claiming their campaign was tongue-in-cheek and meant to raise awareness about real animal cruelty rather than demand any action from Nintendo. They insisted they were huge Mario fans themselves, but by that point the damage was done. PETA had turned a beloved children's character into a symbol of animal cruelty complete with blood-soaked imagery. And it had reflected so much worse on PETA than it did on Nintendo. Super Mario Galaxy controversial Quebec French localization. Quebec's language laws had been brewing for decades when Nintendo finally decided to localize Super Mario Galaxy for French-Canadian audiences in 2007. Bill 101, the charter of the French language, had been forcing companies to provide French versions since 1977, but video games had slipped through the net somehow. But Nintendo of America's translation team in Seattle thought they understood what Quebec wanted, so they decided to translate the game into Joual, the street dialect that language purists had actually been fighting against for generations, partly because of its association with the poorly educated. It was a linguistic nightmare waiting to happen. Characters in Super Mario Galaxy suddenly spoke like cartoon caricatures of Quebec stereotypes. The mailman greeted players with ultra-casual, incorrect French. Toad joined in. Princess Peach was the only one who actually maintained formal French. Everybody else was just speaking absolute nonsense. The government body that had spent 30 years preserving proper French publicly denounced Nintendo's approach. The Union des Artistes also argued that the translation actively damaged French literacy among young Quebec gamers, making them rely too heavily on slang and offensively inaccurate grammar. It's fair to say that Nintendo had misread the room entirely, or at least it heard what the room wanted in a different language. Quebec wanted French translations, not linguistic mockery disguised as cultural sensitivity. The controversy forced Nintendo to completely overhaul its localization strategy for Canada. By the time Zelda Link's Awakening arrived in 2019, Nintendo had hired actual Quebec translators who understood the difference between authentic vocabulary and offensive caricature. Well, we hope. Level 2. Birdo's Gender Identity Controversy. Nintendo's 1998 instruction manual for Super Mario Bros. 2 contained a single line that was kind of interesting, for lack of a better word. Birdo, the pink dinosaur boss, was described as a character who thinks he is a girl and would prefer to be called Birdetta. Now, that's a fairly brief line in the manual, but it's weird. The manual's phrasing deliberately misgenders Birdo while simultaneously acknowledging her preferred identity, which essentially suggests that Birdo as a character is delusional. It takes a complex idea and reduces it to some casual mockery, which undoubtedly means that young players absorbed this message about gender identity being something you could think you were, rather than something you simply are. The backlash did develop, but Nintendo didn't evolve to clear up her gender issues at all. Instead, they just quietly removed any mention of Birdo's gender identity. The company began referring to her with female pronouns in some games while maintaining male pronouns in others, creating a kind of geographical lottery of identity. American players saw her as female, while British and Dutch audiences encountered male pronouns in the same game. The situation escalated with the release of 2008's Captain Rainbow, where Birdo appears to be imprisoned for using a woman's restroom. Players must search her bedroom for proof of her gender, discovering a censored vibrating object under her pillow. Now, adult joke aside, Nintendo tried to position this whole thing as a joke. But as we see in our modern world, there's a lot of people out there facing this very bleak reality of having their existence questioned. Decades later, Nintendo still refuses definitive answers. Each regional release carries different pronouns. Each game treats her identity as fluid or non-existent, which is ironic given that Nintendo actually created gaming's first transgender character and then began to treat that identity as negotiable, disposable, or comedic. Super Mario Maker level removals. 7-year-old Daniel spent 3 hours crafting his first Super Mario Maker level. Within an hour of upload, after receiving a star from another player, it vanished from Nintendo servers entirely. No explanation, no appeal process, just gone. His father watched his confusion turn to devastation. The level couldn't be re-uploaded. Nintendo systems prevent deleted courses from returning even if rebuilt from scratch. It was gone. Daniel was not alone here. Popular streamer Grand Pooh Bear found his ultra-difficult Pile of Pooh Kai0G deleted, despite earning over 1,200 hearts from 10,500 players. Nintendo cited inappropriate and/or harmful content, but wouldn't elaborate. The title referenced Earthbound's character Pooh, hardly offensive material for anybody who took more than a quick glance. But pretty soon, the deletions grew more and more common. Mission Impossible, Magnum Opus, and Mecha Bowzilla, beloved community landmarks, disappeared simultaneously. What was so strange is that Nintendo had promoted Mecha Bowzilla extensively, making its removal particularly unusual. Creators suspected mass reporting campaigns or algorithmic purges that made no real sense. Nintendo's stated criteria seemed really random. Levels vanished for low popularity despite having stars, while others disappeared for containing political statements, including stages supporting trans rights. The company's family-friendly brand apparently couldn't tolerate messages of supporting other humans. Creators began documenting their losses. One player lost 9 levels in a single wave, all flagged for bugs, despite containing no apparent glitches. It started to become clear that Nintendo's true relationship with its creative communities was built on tolerance, not partnership. User-generated content existed at the company's discretion, subject to removal without recourse or explanation. It's there until it isn't. Super Mario Strikers rejected promotional poster. Nintendo has built its empire on family-friendly entertainment, carefully crafting an image of wholesome fun that parents trust and children adore, and some of us adults. But in 2005, someone at the company greenlit a promotional poster for Super Mario Strikers that shattered every expectation of what Nintendo advertising should be. The poster featured two soccer balls hanging in a net positioned in a way that, let's be honest, leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. Below this provocative imagery sits the tagline, "You're gonna need a pair," in bold lettering, with the Super Mario Strikers logo tucked discreetly in the bottom corner. It's not subtle or clever, it's blatant. But this wasn't some edgy startup trying to grab attention through shock value. This was Nintendo, the same company that had spent decades building trust with families worldwide. Someone in their marketing department looked at this design and thought it belonged in magazines where parents and children might see it together. The poster was intended as a magazine advertisement, presumably targeting gaming publications. But when higher-ups at Nintendo saw what their marketing team had created, the company immediately scrapped the entire campaign. No public explanation, no gradual phase-out, just complete removal. The poster never made it to print, but the damage was contained rather than prevented. Years later, gaming journalist Liam Robertson shared the image on Twitter, where it spread rapidly across the internet, meaning that Nintendo's attempt to bury their mistake had failed completely. If only they had a pair, they might have been able to handle it better. Which, by the way, is not a problem for our subscribers, which is exactly why you should join us, so we can make more great videos. Level 3. Super Mario 64's Moto Enemy. The Nintendo GigaLeak of 2020 cracked Super Mario 64's code wide open, exposing deeply buried secrets that Nintendo clearly never intended for any public consumption. Hidden within those files sat something that probably should have stayed hidden forever. Its name is Motos, a robot enemy that Nintendo scrapped before release, and looking at the restored footage today, you understand exactly why. Motos has a bulbous, bomb-like body on stubby legs, but instead of the cartoonish charm of a bomb, Motos sports razor-sharp claws and two hollow white eyes staring from the top of its head. No mouth, no expression, just those vacant sockets tracking Mario's movement across lethal lava land. Yeah, creepy. The behavior makes it worse, if you can believe it. Chuck his grab and throw Mario, sure, but they're purple boxing gloves with personality. Motos operates differently. It trudges toward Mario with mechanical persistence, claws outstretched. Once it grabs him, the thing doesn't just throw Mario anywhere. It carries him directly to the nearest cliff edge or lava pit every single time. The code confirms this isn't random enemy behavior, it's programmed to be this evil. YouTuber Arthur Tilley restored the complete enemy from the leaked assets, and watching Motos in action feels weird in a way that can't really be described. It's a lot creepier than the other bad guys you encounter. I think it's the way the robot moves with deliberate menace, taking its time to reach Mario before efficiently disposing of him in the most lethal way possible. There's no comedic timing or playful bouncing, he's just gone. Nintendo likely removed Motos because it crossed a line. Where other enemies feel like obstacles or puzzles, this thing reads like a stalking machine designed specifically to end Mario's existence. The developers had already filled Lethal Lava Land with bullies pushing players around, but Motos would have fundamentally changed the level's tone from challenging to genuinely sinister. Mario's rival renamed to avoid controversy. In 1985, when Wrecking Crew was released, Nintendo introduced a new character, a construction foreman whose Japanese name was romanized as Blackie. The character pursued Mario through demolition sites, wielding a hammer and sporting black facial hair, but it was his name that carried the real weight. Western localizers immediately recognized that as an issue. When Wrecking Crew reached American and European shores, they quietly renamed the character Spike, understanding that Blackie translated directly into pretty much a racial slur. But the character himself appeared as a white construction worker, making the name even more inexplicable. It obviously wasn't racially charged, just unfortunate. For 38 years, two versions of this character existed simultaneously. American players knew him as Spike, while Japanese audiences continued calling him by the original problematic name. Nintendo never bothered to address this discrepancy publicly, allowing the situation to just continue through multiple game appearances and re-releases. But the name carried a particular sting because it served no apparent purpose. Some speculated it referenced his black beard, others suggest it was meant to evoke Blackbeard, but the obvious English translation was right there. This is what the name was, with no clear meaning. The character design showed no connection to the name beyond its dark facial hair. In April 2023, Nintendo finally acted. With the Super Mario Bros. Movie approaching its Japanese release, the company announced via Twitter that Blackie would become Spike in all future Japanese material. They offered no explanation for the timing or reasoning, simply stating the name would match Europe and the United States. The announcement came without apology or acknowledgement of the decades-long inconsistency. After nearly 4 decades of maintaining separate names across regions, Nintendo quietly unified their branding to be slightly less offensive. I guess that's progress. Super Mario Odyssey Mexican Mario box art removal. As Super Mario Odyssey was gearing up for release, the game's original box art contained something that mysteriously isn't there today. Mario stood proudly in traditional Mexican attire, his sombrero tilted just right, colorful poncho draped across his shoulders. The image was small but unmistakable, tucked into the corner alongside other snapshots of Mario's globe-trotting adventures. In fact, this was not just for the box art. Nintendo had built an entire marketing campaign around Mario's cultural transformations. At E3 2017, developers demonstrated Mario purchasing the sombrero and poncho in the Sand Kingdom shop, explaining how the local dress code required proper attire. The crowd cheered when Mario emerged in full Mexican regalia, guitar in hand. So naturally, all of the marketing materials celebrated this diversity. Why wouldn't they? 40 different outfits referencing Nintendo's history, each one a loving tribute to different cultures and eras. But then something shifted. Between June and August 2017, that corner image vanished. Mario swimming with snorkel gear replaced the image of him in a sombrero. Nintendo didn't give an explanation, the change just happened quietly across major retailers around the world. It's believed that accusations of cultural appropriation had surfaced, claiming Nintendo was exploiting Mexican stereotypes, which was ironic because actual Mexican fans responded with confusion and disappointment. One Reddit user wrote, "As a Mexican, and on behalf of all Mexicans, we don't give a shit, it's Mario." Another expressed genuine sadness. "We loved the sombrero Mario, now they took it away from the box." The sombrero outfit remained in the final game. Players could still purchase it, wear it, pose for screenshots, but its removal from the box art sent a message about corporate fear overriding cultural celebration. Nintendo had created something that Mexican fans genuinely appreciated, then erased it from their most visible marketing material based on complaints from people who weren't even part of that community. To this day, the company has never acknowledged the change, but Mexicans remain disappointed that Mario's sombrero was hidden from the world. Mario's Picross. Alcohol and tobacco puzzles removed in international version. In 1995, Japanese players got the very first look at Nintendo's latest puzzle game, Mario's Picross. But what they played was not the game that reached American Game Boys. Hidden within the innocent grid-based gameplay were pixelated images of cocktails, wine glasses, beer steins, and tobacco pipes that players would methodically uncover through logical deduction. The Japanese players saw them and then moved on to the next level. Pretty easy. But then localization began. Nintendo of America's content policy strictly prohibited any depiction of alcohol or tobacco regardless of context. What followed was a systematic replacement campaign that erased every single offending image. The cocktail became a boo ghost, the wine glass transformed into a silk hat, the beer stein morphed into a crow, even cultural items like traditional Japanese bells and folding fans disappeared, replaced by hamburgers and angels. Now, the original Japanese developers had created 256 puzzles, including 10 that depicted adult beverages and smoking materials. Nintendo of America identified each problematic image and commissioned replacements, ensuring Western players would never encounter Mario chiseling away blocks to reveal a sake bottle or tobacco pipe. because God forbid children should have to ask their parents, "What is a wine glass?" This was just one example of Nintendo of America's broader censorship philosophy during the 1990s. The company was actively sanitizing imported Japanese games to meet conservative American standards of the era. In Japanese culture, these images were nothing, just mundane everyday objects, nothing offensive or shocking. But American corporate executives deemed them corrupting influences that required total elimination. The replaced puzzles still exist in the original Japanese ROM, which makes for a confusing discovery if you're someone who remembers the American version, but it turns out other countries are, not afraid of beer glasses. Impressive. Wigger Wednesday. April 22nd, 2015 probably started like any other Wednesday at Nintendo of America's social media headquarters. Someone sat down at their computer, probably sipping coffee, ready to engage with millions of Mario fans across Twitter, whether they wanted to or not. They were given a clear plan for the day: post a cute photo of Waluigi riding a Wiggler character and let fans choose their favorite with hashtags. The employee typed out the tweet, attached the plush toy photo, and hit send. Within minutes, they realized that something was terribly wrong. Instead of the cheerful hashtag Wiggler Wednesday they intended, they had accidentally created hashtag Wigger Wednesday. One missing letter transformed an innocent gaming promotion into a corporate nightmare. In case you don't know, the term Wigger is a derogatory slur combining white and the N-word, and it usually is used to describe white people who adopt African American cultural mannerisms, speech patterns, and fashion choices. Basically, it's a way to mock white people who are appropriating black culture, particularly in hip-hop communities. Twitter erupted immediately. Users began screenshotting the original post before Nintendo could take it down, and suddenly the hashtag was trending as people shared the mistake with disbelief and their own jokes. Now it was time for Nintendo's damage control team to do their business. They quickly deleted the post, following up with a hasty apology. "When tweeting about one of our characters, we missed a letter. Oops, sorry about that." But the internet never forgets. Screenshots circulated for years afterward, spawning countless memes and Reddit threads, cementing itself as one of gaming's most awkward and hilarious corporate blunders. Even today, players joke about Wigger Wednesday when Nintendo posts anything Wiggler-related. Level 4. China's Mario-like anti-corruption video pulled for copyright irony. The Central Political and Legal Affairs Commission of the Communist Party of China had a problem. They wanted to double down on their anti-corruption message to really hammer it home to their citizens, but the message was just not that appealing. So they got creative. And by creative, I mean they copied the first thing they saw. That's how we ended up with this video featuring a mustachioed plumber in overalls and a red cap wielding a judge's gavel like a weapon. I know what you're thinking. The character looks exactly like Mario. Not inspired by Mario, not reminiscent of Mario, exactly like Mario. Well, yeah, this wasn't some underground bootleg operation or a small-time knockoff merchant. This was China's top political and legal authority using Nintendo's most recognizable character without permission to make a clear political point. The video showed suit-wearing Mario stomping on criminals and smashing gang leaders in the name of China's peace. He administered death penalties so casually you'd think he just collected that hammer from a power-up box. Even the background music was exactly like the theme Nintendo had given us. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. Mario collected coins throughout his judicial rampage. Those coins spelled out intellectual property in Chinese characters. A government entity was using Mario to promote intellectual property protection while simultaneously stealing Japan's intellectual property. Mario. I wonder how you spell hypocrisy in Chinese. Anyway, Japanese media outlets immediately spotted the supreme irony of China's highest court, teaching its citizens about stealing and copyright protection using copyrighted material they'd stolen. The commission had essentially created a how-to guide for intellectual property theft while preaching against it. But Nintendo maintained its silence, refusing to comment on individual cases, which actually is not that common for them since they love to shut down IP issues when it's small independent creators who don't make money from their work. But apparently a government is not their thing. Anyway, Japanese gamers weren't as diplomatic. They flooded social media with observations about China's approach to intellectual property law, causing such a massive media frenzy that the video vanished from Chinese social media within days. They didn't apologize or explain, the commission simply deleted their Mario judge and moved on, leaving behind only screenshots and cached versions as evidence of their brief foray into copyright infringement. The entire episode lasted less than a week, but at least it gave the Chinese government a great example of intellectual property theft themselves. Paper Mario: The Origami King censorship. When Nintendo released Paper Mario: The Origami King in 2020, players discovered something had gone missing in the Chinese translation. A Toad character, folded into origami and desperate for help, originally cried out about his people's suffering. The English version was actually very direct and unflinching. What do they have against toads? It's not fair. Toads have rights. This is toad abuse. But Chinese players heard something entirely different. The same distressed character now spoke of wanting clean appearances and peaceful lives. Where the original Toad demanded human rights and freedom, the Chinese version mentioned only plain outlook and tranquil existence. It's like taking a prisoner's cry for freedom and changing it to say, "We want yogurt." Social media activist Shaw Tim was the first to bring attention to these changes on Twitter, posting side-by-side screenshots that revealed the extent of the alterations. The Japanese characters for human rights and freedom had been totally replaced. It should have been a direct translation, but it became an interpretation instead. The timing made everything worse. Hong Kong protests were raging when the game launched, so obviously players immediately connected the censorship to China's political climate, even though the game wasn't actually released in mainland China. The Chinese version was created for Chinese speakers outside mainland China, making the self-censorship even more confusing and bizarre. Some people dismissed this as just an issue of standard localization, pointing out that translation often requires creative adaptation. But others saw something more sinister. Did Nintendo bow to political pressure, or did translators preemptively sanitize the content? You be the judge. Mario Party 2 gun scene removed. By the time Japanese players got to the end of Western Land in Mario Party 2, they got to indulge all their Western fantasies. Mario faced off against Bowser in what looked like a classic Wild West showdown. The dust settles, the music builds, two characters square off in the desert heat. I mean, it's classic cowboys. The characters drew real guns, actual revolvers gleaming in their hands, barrels pointing at each other's faces. The orange streak of light cuts across the background as they fire these real weapons with real bullets flying through the air. Let me just spell this out one more time. Nintendo let Japanese children watch Mario and Bowser attempt to eliminate each other with lethal force. It's actually a surprisingly fun part of the game, but somewhere between Tokyo and America, someone understandably got nervous. The international version tells a different story entirely. Those same hands that once gripped cold steel now hold cork poppers, which are obviously way less high stakes and, less familiar to Americans than the original version. It wasn't a creative choice, really. Nintendo's 1990s content policies demanded family-friendly entertainment, working to remove anything that might upset parents or, arguably more importantly, politicians. The company that built an empire on jumping plumbers couldn't afford to show those same characters engaging in armed combat or Hitman-like fun. But we have to acknowledge how genuinely crazy it is that Nintendo's original vision was to actually design a scene where beloved characters solve conflicts through gunfire. They animated Mario's trigger finger and Bowser's aim. That's insane. The Japanese cartridge still contains the version Nintendo doesn't want Americans to see. The one where Mario settles disputes with deadly force. Magnum Mario, as I've come to know him. Mario Royale, fan game takedown. Mario Royale appeared in June 2019 like a kind of fever dream. Inferno Plus, a YouTuber with a knack for creating cursed game modifications, had taken the original Super Mario Bros. And transformed it into something Nintendo never would have dreamed. A 75-player battle royale where dozens of Marios raced through familiar levels simultaneously. The players couldn't directly touch each other, but they competed for the same power-ups, the same coins, the same path to victory. When one player grabbed a mushroom, it disappeared for everyone else. It was chaotic and messy and so much fun. Obviously, the game exploded overnight, with nearly 1,000 players flooding the servers on day one. Gaming blogs picked up the story, social media went wild, and for a brief moment, Inferno Plus had achieved something remarkable. He'd made Nintendo's most iconic character feel fresh again. But Inferno Plus knew what was coming. The likelihood that Nintendo was going to invite him to design a game or work with them was low, to say the least. The legal letter arrived exactly when expected, roughly 2 weeks after launch. It basically said some variation of, "Take it down, now." But instead of surrendering, Inferno Plus tried something desperate. Working around the clock with a small team, he gutted every Nintendo asset from the game. Mario became Infringio, the familiar sprites turned generic, and even the iconic sounds vanished. DMCA Royale was born from the ashes. A hollow shell of its former self, but still functionally the same game. Nintendo wasn't amused. A second cease and desist arrived, this time targeting the level design and core mechanics themselves. The message was clear. Even a game that merely resembled their property was unacceptable. Inferno Plus suspected that the real reason he was targeted is that his creation posed competition to Mario Maker. Knowing that he could never fight against Nintendo, the servers went dark permanently. Nintendo won again. Now everyone can enjoy the same tired game mechanics they played a million times with none of the creativity or fun. Level 5. Super Mario Bros. 1993 live-action deleted dark scenes. The 1993 live-action Super Mario Bros. Film remains infamous for its bizarre cyberpunk vision that strayed about as far from Nintendo's colorful world as it could possibly get. But what many don't realize is that the theatrical cut is actually very much toned down from the directors Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel's original darker version. When Disney purchased the distribution rights weeks before filming began, they discovered a project that was wildly inappropriate for family audiences. The filmmakers had crafted something far more disturbing than the studio expected, given the source material, leading to significant content removal before release. And by significant, I mean it. One particularly grim deleted scene featured Dennis Hopper's King Koopa eliminating a technician who dared to sneeze in his presence. Koopa placed him in the Devo chamber, completely de-evolving him back to primordial slime. In the theatrical cut, viewers see Koopa mysteriously slipping in unexplained ooze. Well, now we know he was actually sliding around in the remains of his victim. Another cut sequence showed Koopa's introduction differently. Rather than the sanitizing hands moment from the final film, Koopa originally strangled his campaign advisor to death for delivering bad news about voting results. After ending the advisor's life, he complained to Lena about getting his hands dirty, and then you get the idea. But perhaps the most shocking of all was the boom boom bar sequence that somehow partially survived into the final cut. Decades after the movie came out and bombed, John Leguizamo revealed that the filmmakers populated the scene with actual exotic dancers from North Carolina wearing extremely revealing outfits. Disney executives were horrified, demanding significant edits, blurring, and primitive CGI alterations to make the scene less provocative and more suitable for children's eyes. Once all of these cuts and more were implemented, the movie had been cut down from 125 minutes to 104. A work print discovered in 2019 revealed these darker elements, which fans have since restored into the final movie. The restoration showcases a film that was never meant for children, despite being based on Nintendo's family-friendly franchise. It also taught Disney a valuable lesson: do your research before you buy. Oh, that and trust the fungus. Torimote, Super Mario Galaxy. Following the release of Super Mario Galaxy, data miners began combing through the game's files looking for something interesting. And they found it. Among the unused content, they discovered a creature called Torimote, a scrapped enemy that reveals a much darker side to the company's creative process. Actually, the name itself provides the first clue to why this digital beast never made it past development. Torimote is one romanization of the Japanese word torimochi, which translates to bird lime. This sickly, viscous substance has been used for centuries to trap birds and small animals by coating branches and surfaces where they might land. They basically smear this adhesive trap across perches, then wait for unsuspecting creatures to become hopelessly stuck. Once caught, the animals struggle desperately only to become more entangled in the gummy material until they're completely immobilized. And at that point, they're basically just waiting for the end. The enemy design reflects that grim inspiration. Torimote appears as a bird-like creature with an unsettling facial expression, its features twisted into a kind of weird Monopoly Man kind of image. But the model files exist without animation, suggesting development halted before the creature could move or interact with players. Only static geometry remains, frozen within the game's code. We don't know the exact reason Nintendo decided to completely remove Torimote, but it likely stems from the controversial nature of bird lime trapping itself. Many countries have banned this method of capture due to its indiscriminate and inhumane effects. After all, the practice doesn't just catch intended targets. Any creature that touches the trap becomes victim to the same fate. Birdlime causes prolonged distress as trapped animals exhaust themselves trying to escape, often sustaining injuries in the process. For a company built on family-friendly entertainment, incorporating an enemy based on practices like these would have created uncomfortable associations. So they cut it, and now the Torimote file remains buried in Galaxy's data forever. Level 6. UK recall of Mario Party 8. Nintendo's Mario Party 8 hit UK shelves on a Friday. By Monday, every copy was gone. Normally, that would be because of high demand for the latest Mario game, but this time it's because Nintendo had yanked them all back, claiming an assembly error had shipped the wrong version. Well, that was a lie. The real reason was that buried in the code was a single word that transformed a family party game into a problem for the British public. When players reached the Shy Guys Perplex Express board, the blue wizard Kamek would cheerfully announce, "Magikoopa Magic! Turn the train spastic! Make this ticket tragic!" That rhyming incantation contained a term that carries quite a lot of controversy in British culture. While Americans might dismiss spastic as harmless slang, the UK recognizes it as one of the most damaging slurs against disabled people. The actual meaning behind the word was to describe muscle spasticity in conditions like cerebral palsy, but British children took this word and variations of it to target anyone perceived as different or clumsy. By 1994, it had become so common that the Spastic Society rebranded itself as Scope, abandoning a name that had become synonymous with a slur. Just weeks before the game was released, Ubisoft had pulled their DS game Mind Quiz for the exact same offense, proving this wasn't an isolated incident but a pattern of cultural blindness in the localization process. The gaming industry was learning that shared language doesn't mean shared sensitivity. Every culture had its own unique traits and social standards. Nintendo's official response blamed manufacturing errors, but the evidence was inescapable. Screenshots circulated all over social media showing Kamek's offensive dialogue, captured by players who'd managed to buy copies during the brief window of availability. Even today, those who still have the game continue to share it. But while all of that was going on, the company quietly began working on a sanitized version, replacing spastic with erratic while maintaining the rhyme scheme. The recall lasted 3 weeks. When Mario Party 8 returned to UK stores on August 3, 2007, it had already cost Nintendo both money and reputation. The game sold well, but the British media had a field day covering the story, and it gave a lot of people some online clout for a day. Super Mario RPG Toadstools ? Item. When playing Super Mario RPG, players stumbling through Princess Peach's bedroom accidentally discovered something hidden behind the fireplace. The item was labeled simply Toadstools ? That's 3 question marks that raise more questions than they answer. Well, it raises more question marks, 3 to be exact. The moment Mario approaches the mysterious object, panic sets in. Grandma Toad rushes across the room, practically throwing a mushroom at Mario while insisting he mind his own business. Later, when Peach joins the party and catches Mario near her hidden possession, her reaction turns sharp. Stop peeking into other people's rooms. So obviously, this thing is something of note since Grandma Toad and Peach don't want you sniffing around. But the real revelation lurked in the original Japanese version. There, the item wasn't called ? At all. It was brazenly labeled Peach's XXX. That XXX rating left little to the imagination about what Princess Peach kept stashed away from prying eyes. You can pretty much fill in the gap yourself there, but it's not something that kids should know about. The localization team faced an impossible choice. Keep the explicit Japanese name and risk parental outrage, or sanitize it into harmless question marks while preserving the suggestive scenario. They chose the middle path. They somehow managed to maintain the secretive, embarrassing discovery while obscuring exactly what Mario had found. Everybody was happy. But players still filled in the blanks themselves. Online forums exploded with theories ranging from adult toys to explicit reading material to bottles of hard liquor or worse. Especially since fans soon realized the item's placement. It was tucked away in the most private corner of Peach's most private space. Interesting. Nintendo actually doubled down in the 2023 remake. Rather than removing this decades-old Easter egg, they preserved every uncomfortable detail and even made it so that the English version was now Peach's ? Rather than Toadstools. The panicked reactions, the hidden location, the mysterious nature, all remained intact. Even Princess Peach's scolding survived translation, ensuring new generations of players would stumble upon whatever their beloved princess desperately wanted to keep hidden. The question marks continue masking something Nintendo knew players would recognize. If you know what it is, well, that might say more about you than Peach herself. Mario Party Injury. When Mario Party launched on Nintendo 64 in 1998, it was promoted as harmless family entertainment, featuring beloved characters competing in colorful board game adventures. Which it was, but there was some trouble. Specifically, 5 challenges that demanded furious joystick rotation: tug-of-war, paddle battle, pedal power, castaways, and deep-sea divers. Players quickly discovered that using their thumbs for these games wasn't just enough to win, but if they put their palms on the grooved tip of the N64 and rapidly spin it around, well, now they're onto something. So children all over the world pressed their hands against the plastic stick and twisted frantically, their skin grinding against those unforgiving plastic ridges. Initially, the problems were minimal. Blisters appeared first, then friction burns that left raw patches across young palms, but the damage quickly escalated. Kids developed cuts deep enough to require medical attention. One child needed a tetanus shot after sustaining what doctors classified as second-degree burns. The most disturbing detail of all, that burn happened after just 15 to 20 minutes of gameplay. Parents started calling Nintendo in growing numbers, describing wounds that looked like their children had grabbed hot metal when all they had done was play Mario Party. The company's response was a recorded message suggesting players use only their thumbs and forefingers, which was a lawyer-recommended strategy to get themselves off the hook. But winning required palm spinning, forcing these young players to make an impossible choice between short-term victory and long-term safety. What else are they gonna choose? By 2000, complaints reached the New York Attorney General's office. Nearly 100 families reported injuries ranging from blisters to lacerations and punctures. Elliot Spitzer's investigation revealed that the scope of the danger was way bigger than anybody took seriously. Nintendo had sold over 1 million copies, meaning thousands of children were potentially at risk. The settlement forced Nintendo to provide protective gloves to any family that requested them, potentially costing the company $80 million in the process. But because of Mario Party, an entire generation of players carried permanent scars from what should have been innocent entertainment. They did, however, win a hell of a lot of games, so good on them for that one. Level 7. Super Mario Kart Victory Animation Censorship. The year was 1992, and Nintendo had just released Super Mario Kart in Japan. But while every winner got to enjoy their victory, the players who managed to guide Princess Peach to first place were treated to a little something more unexpected. She grabs a bottle of champagne, tilts it back, and drinks. Her face flushes red, and suddenly she's visibly intoxicated, swaying as the victory music plays. Bowser's animation was also exactly like this one. The King of Koopas doesn't just pose with his trophy bottle, he actively drinks the champagne, chugging it down in celebration of his victory. Both characters, one supposedly pure and innocent, the other a villain, united in their consumption of alcohol after winning a go-kart race. Which, to be fair, is how many of us would react to winning, right? But when Nintendo of America received the game for localization, executives were not happy about this discovery. The company's strict family-friendly content policies classified the drinking animations as inappropriate for younger audiences. The champagne had to go. But not the bottles themselves. Bowser's drinking animation became a harmless pose because developers changed it so that he would simply hold his bottle up and down. But Peach's transformation was way more dramatic. Instead of drinking and becoming visibly affected by alcohol, she now tosses the bottle into the air and catches it like a carnival performer. Okay, so instead of getting a little buzz, she's now a cocktail master. That's better. Nintendo had effectively created two versions of the same characters. In Japan, Peach could get drunk because it's not considered to be such a problematic thing in that culture. But in America and Europe, she could only juggle. I guess alcoholism is so bad in the West that we prefer circus performers. Anyway, the company's censorship policies had basically turned a moment of adult indulgence into a sanitized, family-friendly performance. Because that's what winning is all about, right? Moderation. Super Mario World, Yoshi eating dolphins. Okay, so you're Mario traversing the aquatic depths of Vanilla Secret 3 when suddenly these adorable goggle-wearing dolphins emerge from the water. They're bouncing playfully, creating perfect platforms for you to hop across dangerous waters filled with spiky porcupuffers. These creatures aren't enemies. They're genuinely trying to help you reach safety. Like all dolphins, we want to just love them. It turns out Japan doesn't feel the same way. In the original Japanese release of Super Mario World, Yoshi could open his massive jaws and swallow these helpful dolphins whole. I'm not talking about biting them or even attacking them. I'm saying he could completely consume creatures whose only crime was offering assistance to Mario. The dolphins would disappear entirely and Yoshi would gain coins for the deed. It's pretty crazy. Just think about the implications here. These aren't aggressive monsters or obstacles blocking your path. They're not enemies in any way. These dolphins actively leap out of dangerous waters to provide safe passage, even wear those distinctive swimming goggles to give them an almost childlike innocence. Yet Yoshi treats them like snacks, devouring beings that exist solely to help Mario survive the level. Nintendo's localization team recognized something deeply unsettling about that, so when Super Mario World reached Western audiences, they quietly removed Yoshi's ability to consume dolphins. Now sure, there's some cultural sensitivity about dolphin hunting that played a role, but there's something more fundamentally disturbing about eating creatures that are trying to save you, isn't there? Interestingly, when Super Mario Advance 2 brought the game to Game Boy Advance, Nintendo restored this capability across all regions. Players worldwide could finally experience Yoshi's appetite for his aquatic helpers. Apparently, the world was no longer concerned about a fictional dinosaur eating a dolphin. If you're still in the mood to see more disturbing games in action, why not check out this video on the most disturbing RPGs?